Jill, so great to have you back on Mea Culpa. Thankful. There's so much chaos going on. Got to jump right into it because the hour goes by way too fast. Now, look, Trump is already making statements that the United States should own the Gaza Strip and should turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. My question to you, how dangerous is this kind of rhetoric? And what does it say about the grasp of foreign policy by those that are surrounding President Trump?
First of all, Michael, let me say it's great to see you again, be with you. Second of all, this started not recently. If you remember, Jared Kushner was talking about seaside and great beachfront property. This is part of his business as a real estate person. Of course, he's been bankrupt in that field, as you well know. So he's not even that good at it. But it's so insulting. People are saying it's a war crime, that it's genocide. I think the ultimate irony would be if Jack Smith returns to his old job prosecuting war criminals and gets to prosecute Donald Trump for war crimes and genocide. Wouldn't that be the ultimate irony?
Well, tell me where could something like that, in what universe could something like that even occur? I mean, Trump is going to be president for the next 4 years. By the time that he finishes, he'll be, 82, 83 years old? I know he wants another term, and there's already a Republican out there drafting legislation in order to change the Constitution that would allow another term for Trump. So by the time, even assuming that he wins it again, you would have an 86-year-old man being prosecuted by Jack Smith. I don't see it. And what would be the war crime?
The war crime is the devastation of a former country and the elimination of its entire population, which is being labeled genocide, saying that they cannot go back, that they are going to be ousted permanently, that they should be taken in by two countries that have said they aren't taking them in, Egypt and Jordan. And so the war crime is what is the displacement of an entire population that has been granted this property as their homeland. They want to go back. He has no right to keep them out. Yes, it is devastated. Yes, it needs rebuilding. That's what places like USAID that he's now abolished, that's what they do. That's what the nations of the world come together. That's what we did after world wars. We came back and did the rebuilding that was necessary in Germany. That's what we did. We were victors and we came back, and victorious, we helped those countries. And now, I mean, somebody was joking about it's not the Monroe Doctrine, it's the moron doctrine. And it certainly seems to be moronic. But in a way, it's also clever because dictators bombard you. They have a fire hose coming at you, the tsunami of different things. It makes it hard for anyone to focus on the one worst thing or the 10 worst things, because there's 100 worst things. Are we going to focus on the horrors of his cabinet? Are we going to focus on the horror of his buyout offers to all federal employees? Are we going to focus on his firing before terms are over of EEOC commissioners, the 2 of the 3 Democrats? Are we going to focus on the Consumer Financial Protection Agency firings? Are we going to focus on how he managed to oust Wray before his term was over? Are we going to focus on, you name it? There's just so many things.
Right. Department of Education. Are we going to go ahead and start on the Environmental Protection Agency?
Yes.
You're right. It's a fire hose, which is why he has done over 100 executive orders since taking office. But I do want to.
And some of them are clearly, let me just say, I just want to say, some of them are illegal and some of them are unconstitutional. The illegal ones violate statutes that Congress has passed, including the Impoundment Act that prevents him from stopping the funding of all federal grants. And I can tell you, I mean, I had one friend who burst into tears because her husband is very, very ill. And she is depending on life-saving research that is ongoing now. And his cutting it off devastated her. I had a friend call because they have a child who's non-binary and their passport says X. And
Not
they were out of
anymore.
the country. They're out of the country. If they don't get back in before this takes, they can't come back in because their passport says X. It has to say F or M. And the country is going to start seeing, aside from the fact that I haven't bought eggs, but I'm told that they are now over $10 a dozen. And his promises that people really cared about, promises about grocery prices. He's not doing anything to help grocery prices. What is he doing? He wants to see a Trump hotel on the beaches of Gaza. That's what he wants.
Yeah, well, I would suspect he's going to do exactly what they did on the West Side Highway, where they put up a couple dozen buildings, one after the other. Trump Riverside, Trump Tower, Trump Palace, Trump Park. He had them all there. And by the way, he did the same thing in Florida as well on Collins Avenue on the water with Trump Ocean and Trump Grand, Trump, International. I mean, he had them all. But I did want to just correct you on something because, the devastation to Gaza did not take place under the Trump administration. The complete devastation, the annihilation of the buildings, the roads, and so on, that took place under the Biden administration. So I'm not really certain how that becomes a war crime to Trump. Now, I'm with you. I don't like the notion.
No. Let me be clear. I'm sorry if you misunderstood me. It's not the devastation of Gaza that is the war crime. And although you know that Israel has been charged with war crimes for that, but
yes,
that is Israel's action, not the US's actions. If he were to take over and force all the people of Gaza out, remember he said, we are going to own it and we are going to have international citizens living here.
Right. But he also said, which would include, some of the earlier people. Now, I'm not sure what he's referring to in earlier people. Is he going to the Bible and saying that these are the Israelites? I mean, with Trump, he's being very clever, or I should say, very dubious in his responses. The crazy thing is he's going to argue. When people turn around and I try to explain to them, they think that he's a buffoon, that he's a moron, right? With his golden hair and the brown tan and so on, with the very long tie that hangs down below the pubis. These are, let me be very clear. He is not. He is not. In fact, people won't like this, but every promise that he has claimed during his campaign, he is trying to keep. He said he was going to pardon the 1,500 plus defendants, the January 6th defendants. And lo and behold, the very first thing that he did is he granted pardons. He turned around and he said that he was going to intercede in this and he's going to change that and he's going to do this. He's living up to his campaign promises, which really beckons the question, why the hell did anybody vote for somebody who told you in advance what they were going to do, which, by the way, is either unconstitutional, illegal, or just something that is un-American? I don't have an answer to that. That we have to ask my audience, right? Why did people vote for him? I don't have the answer to that.
I think they voted for him because they selectively picked and said, and I know I've talked to people who have undocumented relatives, and they said, well, I never thought they would go after my relatives. It would be someone else. They selectively picked it. When he said, and I'm holding up Project 2025, if you read Project 2025, you're right. The promises in here are all being fulfilled. He said, I have nothing to do with it. I don't know what it is. I've never read it.
I don't know anybody. I've never heard of anybody that's working on it.
It's
Exactly.
all the
Sure.
people that are working for him now are people who wrote these chapters, who pushed these things. If you look at his first 100 days or the first 2.5 weeks so far, if you look at just that and you compare it to something in Project 2025, you will find all of those things. People voted for him because he said, I will take care of you. I am going to lower the prices. Now he's putting in tariffs, which he's had to withdraw, except for China. He withdrew Canada and Mexico because the stock market crashed.
For 30 days.
It's only 30 days, but he's going to find a way to stop it because the stock market crashed as a result of the promise of these, because people will then see all that's happening. How is anyone going to let Kennedy be in charge of health when bird flu is causing eggs to cost us $10 a dozen? We have to have someone who understands pandemics and will act on protecting our poultry farmers and chickens so that we can continue to have eggs at a affordable price.
And you think RFK is not going to be confirmed?
No, I think he is going to be confirmed. I just said, how is it anyone is going to justify it? How is it that anyone is justifying voting for Gabbard, for voting for Patel? I don't know how you can consider voting for those people and think that you're doing the right thing. And that includes Fetterman, who's voted for 2 of them. And it is obviously going to be on the shoulders of Republicans because they do control. They have total control. You have, a 50-50 vote that had to be a tiebreaker with Vance, but it's still on the Republicans. Not one single Democrat voted, and 3 Republicans voted against. So we're in a tough situation where no one can focus on one thing because there are so many things happening. And that's what dictators do. That's what authoritarians do, is they flood the zone. And I just heard an old recording of Steve Bannon saying several years ago in the first administration, this is what we're doing. We're flooding the zone so no one can fight back. And it's the same for the mainstream media. They aren't fighting back because there's so much that they have a little bit on this, a little bit on that, and nobody's focused. We need to have serious long-term focus on each and every one of these things. The takeover of government computers, the attachment of non-secure Tesla or I don't know, SpaceX, but of Elon Musk's computers to our systems is a danger to national security. And people need to recognize the danger that's put in place when you have a 19-year-old who's a genius at whatever he does for Elon Musk, but knows nothing about the government or government policy or foreign policy or the role of USAID, which is shuttered. So fast. I think they're going for a world record. It apparently took the Nazis 53 days. Hitler took 53 days to abolish democracy. At the pace that Donald Trump is going, it's going to take him less than 53 days. He's done significant damage, and this is only the start of week 3. So
let me ask you this then. How do you see the Middle Eastern countries like Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia? How do you see them reacting to Trump's claims, right? Because I know that it's been condemned by them, but do you think this as well will fuel more anti-American sentiment or even destabilize the existing alliances?
I think overall, we are definitely losing our place in the world. Donald Trump can say all he wants. We're respected again. That's nonsense. He lied when he said Saudi Arabia approved his plan to take over Gaza. And you had an official statement come out immediately within minutes of his saying that. I'm not sure it was within minutes, but certainly within a very short time frame, come out and say, we have never supported this. We support the independence of Gaza. And so he's caught on his own lies. He blatantly lies, and we have to start calling them lies. I mean, I have a hashtag on X, which I am thinking of exiting. The only reason I stay is that I have much better conversations with my followers on X. I wish they would come to Blue Sky and have the same conversations. Yeah. I'm on Blue Sky, but I don't get the same. I get a lot of likes. I got a lot of reposts, but people aren't asking me questions and engaging me. Of course, I see a lot of bots and awful things on X, but I do get good questions and good dialogue. So anyway, I have a thing there, and maybe I'll start it now on Blue Sky called hashtag say this, not that. Instead of saying misspeak or say it's a lie, call it what it is. Let's use the right words. Let's call insurrectionists insurrectionists. And we can't repeat his words that put a different spin on it. When you call them patriots, you shouldn't even be repeating that he calls them patriots, because it only gives some credibility to it. And they are not patriots. They are violent insurrectionists. They attacked the police and he pardoned them. They hurt police. They did severe damage. There are people who died, and it's their fault. That is not a peaceful protest any more than calling Edward Snowden a whistleblower is true. He is not a whistleblower. He violated our laws. He did not follow whistleblower. So let's not call him a whistleblower. Let's call him what he is.
Amen to that. Look, Trump's comments as well, they come on the heels of Israel and Hamas, who've negotiated a hostage deal. And I know when I watch and I see the hostages freed, and I see the celebration, by the way, on both sides, even though I wouldn't call, these Hamas, activists hostages, but there's a hostage deal that is right now in place for the Israeli hostages that were taken on October 6th. So all we could do is say, or at least I will say it, that I find the statements by Trump to be reckless. My concern is how these statements will impact these extremely sensitive talks that keep breaking down, getting rejuvenated, break down, rejuvenated. You think that these statements coming out of Trump could embolden Hamas or make the negotiations even more difficult?
I'm not a foreign policy expert, but I would say that Netanyahu looked surprised when he heard Donald Trump say this about taking over Gaza. And I think that if I were Hamas, it might make me afraid that I have no homeland to go to. But I want to just emphasize something you said, because yes, the Israelis and the other nationalities being held as a result of their capture in the raids in October are hostages. They are definitely hostages.
Yes.
In the same way that the Gazans were hostages because there were bunkers underground that had to be taken out, and so their homes were destroyed because they put them with human shields. But the people being released from Israeli jails are there because they were convicted, for the most part. Not all. Some of them did not have trials. And for those who didn't have trials, I don't know that they're hostages.
Yeah, I don't know what to call them.
I don't know what to call them, but
prisoners?
I certainly wouldn't call
prisoners?
them hostages. They are prisoners, but are they rightful prisoners without a trial? I don't know. But many of the people being released have been convicted. There was Barry Weiss apparently had a cousin who was killed, not on October 6th, I think before that. And as part of the release, the killer of her cousin is being released. He had been sentenced to 6 life terms because he killed 6 people, including one of which was her cousin. And that's a tragedy, that killers convicted by overwhelming evidence in a court of law with due process are being released in exchange for people abducted, kidnapped, tortured, and held without any wrongdoing on their part, except for being in Israel on that day and not being able to hide in a way that kept them safe.
Right, and attending a music festival. That's
attending
their
a music
crime.
festival, or
Right.
being in a kibbutz, doing nothing, just being in Israel on a kibbutz. So I just think we cannot use the word hostage exchange. We're exchanging Israeli hostages, and as I say, some of them are not Israeli citizens, some were American, some are other nationalities, but the hostages taken from Israel are being exchanged for prisoners held in jails. And it's not on a one-to-one basis. It's on like
No.
100-to-1, maybe not 100,
Yeah. So I
but
think
it's
that it
close
works
to that.
for every Israeli soldier. I think they're getting 50 Palestinian prisoners. I mean, that numbers are astronomical. But the reason I ask you if it could embolden Hamas, because this is not being well received in the Middle East. And you don't just have Hamas. You have Hezbollah, you have ISIS, you have ISIL, you have, Al Qaeda. You still have these factions. Maybe they're beaten up. Maybe they're smaller than they were at one point in time. Maybe they're tattered and bruised. Sure. But now you take Hamas, who puts out the word, we're looking for soldiers because America, Western America, is coming in and they're taking our Muslim land. I mean, I see this thing as being a fight amongst fights, and Trump now wants to put US military over there within which to protect our land, the annexation now of Gaza. I mean, we're going to get to that issue before, but that's my only fear, is that these statements could ruin the return of the Israeli hostages.
Well, just think about the Saudis and the fact that they were very close to having a very good agreement with Israel. And they're a big and powerful country, a very wealthy country. It would have been very much in the interest of stability in the Middle East. And now they have to call Donald Trump a liar. They have to say, we never said that he could make this the Riviera of the Middle East. That isn't true what he said when he said, well, all these other countries approve of it, including the Saudis. So how would you feel about trusting Donald Trump and his State Department, his ambassador, any of the people who represent him going forward? And doesn't that reflect on Netanyahu and the Israeli government? It does. And so you are right that this could be an impediment to a lasting peace for sure. And, what does this mean to a two-state solution? Well, if their land can be taken away, it's tricky. And what does it mean for the West Bank and for what Donald Trump will do to the occupation in the West Bank?
What does it mean for Donald to decide he wants to annex after that? Maybe he wants to annex Egypt, or he wants to annex Jordan. I mean, let's be serious about this. But let me move on for a quick
you got
second,
Greenland and Panama, and
why not? And then you also have Mexico and Canada. I mean, we're on a tear here. Meanwhile, Trump has continuously and repeatedly criticized Biden for not securing the release of the American hostages fast enough. But given his America to own Gaza claim, don't you think that his rhetoric just further endangers the lives of the remaining hostages? I mean, the thing about Hamas is they understand when they're beaten. They understand right now. I mean, all you have to do is look out. If you even have a window, it's not blown out. You look outside into the street and you see everything around you, as Trump is saying, is rubble. And that's the line that he's using right now, that him moving out these 2 million Palestinian settlers, so to speak, that these Palestinians, that what he is doing is actually humanitarian. That this is not the displacement of 2 million Palestinians from their land, but rather it is so dangerous there, as he keeps saying, that it is so impossible to live there. There are no buildings that are intact, and the ones that are probably going to fall down from destroyed foundations. You have unexploded devices everywhere, that what they need to do is to go in safely and securely, whether it's the US military, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers, whether it's going to be in concert with Saudi Arabia, the Emiratis, or the Qataris, or whoever. You got to go in there and you have to slowly level everything. You have to clear the way to ensure that nobody else gets hurt, because Donald cares.
Sorry, I it's not funny, but it's funny when you say because Donald cares, because Donald only cares about making money and only cares about getting the property for himself. Yes, it's a humanitarian crisis. And yes, there has to be rebuilding. And that should be an international effort to rebuild as quickly as possible and to create temporary housing so that people can return to what was their homeland, to their homes. And yes, it's probably true that most people don't have a home anymore. So there has to be some way to make it safe. That part is true. But something has to be done.
That's the cleverness, that's the geniusness of Donald J. Trump. That's the reason why Donald Trump won this damn election. Because what he does is he takes something that is obvious. You can't go back to this area. There's nothing for you to go back to. There's no supermarkets. There's no gas stations. There's no business. There's no industry. There's no homes. There's nothing. Well, you can't eat rubble. You can't eat dirt, despite what some of the Palestinian that they had interviewed on television. You cannot. So what he wants to do, out of the goodness of his heart and as a humanitarian, so that he gets the Nobel Peace Prize, we need to move them to countries like Jordan or Egypt. Saudi doesn't want them. So it's Jordan or Egypt, who also doesn't want them. We need to move them out for their own protection, and so that we can come in as an international development force and rebuild it into something spectacular, like the Riviera. I mean, that paints one hell of a picture, doesn't it, Jill?
No, because it ignores the obvious rest of his statement. We will own it. Rebuilding and returning is one thing. Doing aid is one thing. Doing a takeover is completely something else again. It goes back to, are we going to fight Denmark for Greenland? Are we going to fight Panama for the canal? I was general counsel of the Army when the new treaty was negotiated after the old treaty was expiring. We built the canal on a lease from the Panamanian country that owned the land. We were given permission to build it and to operate it for 100 years, which sounds like forever, but that's expired because it was done more than 100 years ago. It was done in 1903. So as it was expiring, the Carter administration negotiated a new treaty. And that gave us, which Donald Trump always ignores, priority passage for our naval ships in time of need. That's an important thing, which we wouldn't have had but for this new treaty, because it reverted to the government that had leased it to us, as it would with, if you're a landlord and you lease your apartment, at the end of the lease term, it's still yours to do with what you want. Well, the Panama Canal belongs to the country of Panama. And so when Donald Trump ignores those facts, when he ignores that Jordan and Egypt do not want to take in Palestinians, Gazans, and I hate using the word Palestinians, so Gazans, people who are resident in Gaza, they don't want them. They don't have a place to go. Yes, something has to be done to house them in the interim. And I don't know what that answer is, but I'm sure that the people who should know do know, and they don't have the right to say, and we're going to own it. We don't have the right to own
Wait,
it.
are you trying to tell me that you don't think that Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, that they know what needs to be done for the Gazans?
I don't think they do. And I also think that Steve Witkoff is getting much more credit than he deserves. Donald Trump ignores the fact that these negotiations that have led to this hostage return, and that is when the hostages who were taken from Israel are being returned in exchange for people who are not hostages. That deal was negotiated for a very long time under the Biden administration. It was finalized under the Biden administration, and they deserve the credit for this.
Well, they certainly deserve credit. I don't know who gets 100%, whether it's 1% goes to Witkoff or 5% to Witkoff or 10%. To me, it doesn't matter. If you're in for 1%, you're in for 100. Everybody that has helped to bring home these hostages, I give them a pat on the back. But yes, it should not be ignored that this took place under the Biden administration. Now, I do want to answer, because this whole group, this whole cast of characters, CIA is now, along with, I think, the FBI and other government agencies, are offering, this is to me the craziest shit I've ever heard. They're offering buyouts to an incredibly significant portion of their workforce. I can't begin to even tell my listeners how dangerous this places America. Now, I want to say that this is not routine downsizing, as they're trying to say. To me, it suggests a shift in U.S. intelligence priorities that will weaken the United States' ability to counter global threats. What's your position on that?
I think this is incredibly dangerous. It is, if you were going to downsize, you would first evaluate, what are my priorities? What are the agencies that I need more of? And what are the ones that I need less of? You wouldn't make an across the board offer to anyone who wants to accept. And it could be 100% of the workforce. It won't be. But theoretically, the offer is to 100% minus. There is this one little thing saying, if you work in immigration or national security, this offer isn't to you. And so, for example, Department of Justice attorneys who prosecute civil rights cases, well, it would apply to them because they don't care about civil rights. If you prosecute immigration cases, you couldn't take the buyout. In terms of the buyout, the funding for the government ends in mid-March. Who's going to pay these people if they take the buyout on February 6th when the funding runs out?
I don't know. Do you have any idea how much money we're talking about here?
Well, we're talking about the entire workforce is billions of dollars, maybe trillions. I'm not sure. It's a huge amount of money. And it's to not work for 8 months, but to be paid for 8 months. And then if you're eligible for retirement at the end of 8 months, you get to retire. If you are not going to be eligible, which most of the workforce wouldn't be, because you have to have had the right number of years in and the right age to retire, you get nothing. You get this 8 months if you get it. And remember, Donald Trump does not pay contractors. He does not pay people. He evades it. So will he live up to this bargain? Who knows? Probably not. Will Congress let him live up to it? Maybe not. People can sue and maybe collect back pay for time that they aren't getting paid. But that's an expensive and emotionally fraught thing to have to do. The other thing is, if, let's say, everything went fine and he does pay people and they leave, what's going to happen to our national security? What's going to happen to our the FBI you mentioned? Who's going to investigate crimes? When your child is kidnapped, who's going to find the kidnapper? The FBI is essential to law enforcement in America, and they frequently aid state law enforcement, which is often forgotten. And So we need the FBI. We need the CIA to keep us safe. We need the Treasury Department to function. We need that system that has been taken over by Musk to pay Social Security, to pay Medicare, to pay disabled payments. Everything goes through that system to pay contractors. Betcha that Elon Musk is making sure that he, as a government contractor, is getting paid, even though he is making sure that maybe other people who are his competitors aren't. I wonder, is Bezos a competitor of his? Is he going to get
No.
paid?
You're
I
talking
don't.
about with his rocket ship? It's
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
I don't know.
what's going to happen? And why are these 20-year-olds in charge? Why is he in charge? Who elected him? No one. And yes, he can be appointed a special employee, federal employee, for only 120 days.
Oh, hold on a second, Jill. No, 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 no. Doge started out as a program, as a non-government, it's an outside program to assist government. Not the way that when they brought Trump in on his right after the inauguration, he started talking about Doge, and that is now a government entity. That is a department, and that's how they kept referring to it, the Department of Government Efficiency. And they're going to have offices, in the executive building or what have you, and they're going
They,
to be bringing on more people. They're making it into a government agency.
Number one, if that were true, they would have to have security clearances. And as far as I know, they don't have security clearances. Number two, they
Trump
would
could just
need
give it to them.
yes, he can, unfortunately, which is one of the many things that we are spotting as weaknesses in our government structure. I mean, there are many. That certainly is one. The power of one person to say, I don't care if you have found something bad about Jared Kushner. I want him to have clearance, and he is going to have it. That's a danger for sure. But there has to be some congressional authorization of these actions to create federal employees, to create the funding. He can't just redirect funds to this new thing in the same way that the Impoundment Act prevents him from taking away funds that Congress has authorized. That's already been put on hold when he said, I'm canceling all federal grants. Courts have said, no, you can't do that. And no, you can't ignore the Constitution and birthright citizenship. That's in the Constitution. Sorry, you can't deprive people of that right. He's now calling it DEIA, adding accessibility. And the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, creates certain rights and mandates accommodation.
Yep.
I had a call from someone who is working from home on an accommodation because of disability. Do they have to return to work or be fired? They have a legal right to work from home. And so I would say, no, they can't be forced back to work. And they would have a lawsuit. But who wants to be filing a lawsuit? That is an emotionally horrible thing and expensive, although I am counting on my fellow lawyers to sign up for pro bono services to federal employees
There's
who need
hundreds
their help.
right now. By the way, there's
Yes.
hundreds of pro bono lawyers that have
Yes.
agreed, big firms,
Yep.
small firms, individuals, and so on. Every now and then, we're reminded of those many healthy resolutions that we've made over the years, like to lose weight, to exercise more, to eat better. But a goal without a plan, well, it's a plan that's destined to fail. Prolon's 5-day program, it gives you the tools to put your health goals into action with a science-backed plan that makes it easy to stay focused and to achieve real results. Prolon's fasting mimicking diet, well, it's a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe that they're fasting. Researched and developed for decades at USC's Longevity Institute and backed by leading US medical centers, Prolon helps support healthy blood sugar, enhanced skin appearance, fat loss, and improved energy and focus post-fast. Now, it all starts with their 5-day program. Snacks, soups, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. No guesswork and no planning required. 3 consecutive cycles of Prolon have been shown to reduce your biological age score by an average of, get a load of this, 2.5 years. And your waist circumference, by 1.5 inches. Prolon is fasting with food. That's right. It's fasting, but with food. It all starts with Prolon's 5-day program. Again, snacks, soups, beverages, all designed to make your body think that it's fasting. So let me be clear. I did the 5-day program and I feel much better. Prolon, really, it's not like any other diet that I've tried. Because you know why? It's not a diet. It's truly science. I mean, it was convenient. They sent me everything that I needed all in one box. To help you kickstart a health plan that truly works, Prolon is offering Mea Culpa with Michael Cohen listeners 15% off. You hear that? 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day nutrition program. So go now and visit prolonlife.com/mea culpa. That's PROLONLIFE.com/mea culpa to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. That's prolonlife.com/mea culpa. Go there now. It's not going to be enough. There's not going to be enough lawyers within which, to handle all of this. They'd have to basically give up their practice in order to help somebody else. It's the whole thing is crazy. But I want to ask you, going back to this workforce reduction, you said that, and I agree with you, it's going to impact our intelligence operations. And what concerns me the most are the threats that come in every single day. Threats against our banking, our infrastructure, our national security interests from Russia, from China, from Iran. With Trump continuously and repetitively undermining the intelligence community here in the United States, how much do you think that this really opens us up to these threats?
It makes us extremely vulnerable. It means that our allies are not going to trust us to share information. And that will hurt us as well. Not only will we not have the direct resources to collect our own information, but people aren't going to trust us from our allies. And so they won't share the information that is crucial to our safekeeping, our national security. But let's not just focus on there won't be lawyers to prosecute crimes at the federal level or to enforce civil rights at the federal level. There won't be, he's closing down NOAA now, he being Elon Musk, with supposedly the approval of Donald Trump, the National Oceanographic Administration. There won't be weather reports. There won't be weather predictions. And what about all the websites that are being closed down medically? Bird flu is at the front page of the Tribune, an extremely conservative newspaper, the Chicago Tribune, had huge pictures of all the dead birds along our lakefront and of the warnings to pet owners that if your dog steps on a dead bird or on its, I don't know how to say this on a podcast, bird poop. I don't know. Is that okay to say?
No, bird shit is fine.
Okay. All right. I just went and bought antiseptic wipes for my dog's paws because I don't want him licking his paws and getting bird flu because it is transmissible apparently to pets, and nobody is more loved than my Brisbee. Yeah, that's not true. I know every pet owner is going to say, I love mine more than you love yours, but okay, we all love them. We all need to protect them. But we're not going to get information about bird flu because they don't want us to know. You're going to know about bird flu because you're going to see the price of eggs go up. But we need more than that. We need to protect everybody in America from whatever the flu has been really, really the new variety.
I couldn't believe it. My daughter came running in and she said to me, "Is what's going on with the government? I said, how the hell, why are you asking me? So she goes, I went on to the government's women's health website and it's shut down.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
shut down women's health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously?
Seriously, all of these are shutting down, and we aren't going to have information available. People have been unable to access. I just saw on my neighborhood website, someone was trying to get Social Security information, and that was shut down. The portal was shut down. Now, I can't say, I don't know this person. Maybe he didn't know how to use the site properly. But of course, my suspicion immediately was, well, yeah, it's probably shut down because that's what they're doing. So we need the information from the government. Hospitals need the information from the government. Hospitals need the funding for their continuing research. And I'm worried about, I'm in a study group, and I'm worried that my doctor is going to lose his funding. And then I guess the study will be ended and I'll have to do some other treatment. It's very, very frightening. And the breadth of it is what people are overwhelmed by and not able to respond to. But each one of your listeners is going to see that in some way they are impacted. I just heard that Elon Musk is shutting down the direct file system so that taxpayers who were paying their taxes online to save money are not going to be able to do that anymore. I don't know if it was a temporary shutdown. Maybe it is. But these are the things that are going to impact people on a daily basis. And that is what's going to make the midterms change our Congress. I think we will be able to have a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate once people, not the true MAGA believers, they are not going to believe the facts. But to people who are not in that far right category, people who are just sort of, they didn't come out to vote. They voted for Biden the first time. They didn't bother to come out to vote this time because they just were like not happy. When they see the actual impact of what they have brought upon themselves, and think of all the people who voted for him, Muslims, for example, who voted for him, thinking that he would be better, and they see what's going to happen now, they're going to be really sorry that they voted for him.
You're talking about Pennsylvania, you're talking about Michigan, for example.
Michigan.
Yeah, 100%. So look, we all know that, and I better than most, that Trump's policies are transactional, just as he is. He's a transactional individual. America first at all costs. That's the rhetoric that's coming out of the group. But isn't ceding humanitarian and diplomatic influence to China, as an example, ultimately a long-term loss for the United States' national security?
It is. And just for our reputation as a world leader, he's dropped out of the World Health Organization. He's dropped out of, I forgot what it's called, the International
USAID,
UN, there's
RWA.
All of the UNRWA. Just think of all the things that we aren't participants on. We're no longer a world leader. We are not respected. And his negotiations with Canada and Mexico, which he's claiming victory, he got something that they had already given. They already had 15,000 troops at the southern border. Mexico had 15,000 troops, and he got them to agree to 10, but they already had 15. So what did he gain? Nothing. And the same thing with Canada. Everything that he says they gave him was something they had already agreed to long time ago. And so we're not gaining, we are losing. And the sad thing is that too many Americans are not listening to your show, are not reading the New York Times. They are getting their information from TikTok and OAN, which now, by the way, has a Pentagon spot in the press room, and the New York Times does not.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes. NPR and the New York Times out of the Pentagon, and in come these right-wing organizations. That is not a good way to go. We need unbiased information. Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's calling in PBS and NPR to talk about their bias. What bias? I don't see a bias.
Right,
They are
Marjorie
a neutral
Toilet
force.
Green of all people,
Yes,
So, Joe, let me ask
exactly.
you this then, because during the campaign, Trump claimed again and again and again, and again, it goes to call him whatever you want, but at the end of the day, he managed to convince the plurality of Americans that he's the guy who could end all wars. Right? Remember that?
Yes.
If reelected, I will end all wars. I will stop Ukraine and Russia within 24 hours. I will have the hostages returned before I even take office. Israel Hamas war will be over, blah, blah, blah. Now, today, he's fantasizing about annexing Canada, Mexico, retaking the Panama Canal, taking Greenland, and now asserting some sort of ownership interest in Gaza. Is this just delusional bluster? Or do you think that there's a real danger that he's going to act on these ideas? And I ask that question because everything that the guy has said, and I've been warning people for years now, this idiot Jamie Harrison, who was running the DNC before, nobody wanted to listen. Kamala Harris's people during the campaign, Biden's people, nobody wanted to listen. When Trump tells you what he intends to do, so far, he's acting on each and every one of them, even the ones that right now are in the courts. He doesn't care. With the stroke of a Sharpie and an EO, an executive order, boom, he's getting what he said he was going to get.
Yes and no. And, maybe I'm still being Pollyanna and hopeful that the Democrats are going to really start taking serious action to fight this, that these lawsuits are going to stop him, which, of course, the problem is, even if the Supreme Court rules, who's going to enforce it? And will Hegseth follow illegal orders? I fear that the answer to that is yes. And so we are not out of the woods, even if the courts say this is all illegal. But when you say he's fulfilled his promises, that isn't true. He said he was going to get the prices down on day one. He said he was going to do a lot of stuff on day one that hasn't happened. He said the hostages would be released before he took office. He said the Ukraine war over. It would have never happened, he said, if I had been president. That is not true. The only reason it wouldn't have happened is because he would have helped Russia take over Ukraine. Because
what I really meant to say, Jill, is the promises that coincide with Project 2025.
Yes.
That's what I was meaning to say. Apologies.
Okay, well, yes, those promises, because Project 2025 spent time, and even they didn't foresee all the consequences of their actions. Like, for example, when they said all federal funding cut off. Well, then they had to go, well, we didn't mean things like Medicare and Medicaid. We didn't mean that. So they had to sort of back off of that and then basically rescind a lot of the stuff they said because it just wasn't possible. So, the federal grant all over. Oh, no, we're rescinding that order. So, but they also trained people to take over. They were ready to hire people to put into these places. That doesn't mean those people are qualified. If you put in 1,000 new CIA agents, how long would it take to actually train them to be effective? It's not going to happen overnight. You can't just bring in brand new people and think, you just can't do that. It takes
here you go.
some time.
Here's the file. Read it and let me know what we're doing. Right? Go catch the bad guy. So look, Jill, the hour goes by, like I said, very quickly. I have one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
The end of the day, Trump supporters claim, and they will not back down from it no matter how hard you try to explain to them, that he is a peace president. But with all of this rhetoric that's going on about global conquest, the CIA purges, the fighting and the dismantling of the FBI, the withdrawing of the US aid, and all of the other things that we talked about during the course of this hour. Don't you think that these actions, that this rhetoric poses the greatest risk to global stability? Don't you think that there's now going to be worse action between Russia and Ukraine? It's going to get bad between China and Taiwan. You're going to start to see this expansionism taking place in 2025, like the kind that you saw in the 1500s?
Well, I wasn't around in the 1500s, but
I was just a little kid, but I remember those days.
But I did used to work for an organization called the Assembly of Captive European Nations, which was formed by the countries that had been absorbed into what was then the USSR, the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And they wanted their freedom. And of course, and this was in between my first and second year of law school, so in the late 60s. And it was countries including Hungary, Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, where my parents are from, or my grandparents. And I worry about Moldova being the next attack of Putin. And then he'll go to NATO countries. Once he gets Ukraine, which isn't in NATO, if he gets it, if we don't help Ukraine, if Europe, the EU doesn't help Ukraine, I'm worried about Putin. Then you have to worry about this idea Poland, of our expansionism, but then move from, okay, so you got Russia, Putin, a total dictator, moving to the east. Where does it stop? Does it stop at Germany? Does it stop at the UK? I mean, how far does it go? But then you look at, okay, Donald says Panama's mine, Greenland's mine, Canada's mine. Where does that stop? And how does he get away with that?
It stops at the shoreline, so to speak, right? If you take Canada and you take Mexico, and instead of having border walls, now you have the coastline, right? And he'll tell you that it's easier to protect the coastline than it is to protect a wall.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have to protect ourselves from either Mexico or Canada, so too bad for that. Wouldn't you rather have an independent country that gets attacked from the sea? I mean, and I'm joking about that because I don't want anyone getting attacked at all. It is a terrifying thought. And he says, oh, it would be so pretty. It would look so good. I don't know what delusion he's having. I don't know how he has convinced his followers that this is a good thing. Most of them just are not informed about what's really happening. And so far, no one has found a way to inform them because they're listening to sources of information that don't carry this information.
Yeah. You know, Jill, you know when they're going to realize? When it's at their doorstep and their kid has to end up going over there to go fight a war. Well, when it starts to affect them and it hits them at their home, whether
I still remember the draft. I remember the draft. When I was in law school, there was still a draft. And people, in fact, it affected me in one way, which was my male classmates, and that was 96% of my class, would say, someone's going to die in Vietnam because you took their rightful place in the class. And you'll never practice law, so what are you doing here? And it was true that people were being drafted to fight in what was then a very unpopular war. And I can only think that any war that Donald Trump starts would be equally unpopular when it comes to affecting your child.
Yep.
And so it's a difference between foreign policy and saying, well, he can do anything he wants, foreign policy. But when it means that you're fighting a war and there aren't enough war fighters. And by the way, the language of Hegseth is despicable. He keeps talking about the warrior culture and war fighting and the machine and the lethality. That's not what the Pentagon is all about. That is not what the Department of Defense is. They are supposed to protect us, yes, but it's not by starting wars and fighting wars. It's by being ready to protect us. And so all of this will be different. I think that when students, I spoke at the University of Illinois when I was general counsel of the Army with Congressman Ab Mikva, and there was no more draft at that time. It was an all-volunteer force. And the reaction of students not knowing what draft meant and what it would have meant for them to have a lottery number of 1 or 10 or 100, knowing they would for sure be drafted and not be able to finish college. They would be, pulled out. And I think that's when it'll hit. But remember what it was said about Hitler is first they came for the Jews, then they came for the gypsies, then they came for me, but it was too late for me to stop it because I hadn't stopped it when they came for the first people. And that's the issue. They're coming for LGBTQ. They're coming for doctors. They're coming for whoever. And if we don't stand up to it now, when they come for you, it's going to be too late because there's no one left to protect you. So we should all get out there and protect each other.
Amen to that. Jill, thank you so much. Great to see you, my friend. And
thank you, Michael.
Stay hopeful.
I am. I'm staying involved. I hope everyone here will not get so discouraged that they tune out. I know people are not listening to the news anymore. You can limit the amount. You don't have to listen all day, but listen a little bit, read a little bit. You need to know what's happening so that you can fight for your rights and make sure we protect our government, and so that you can do something in the next election. And there are elections coming up. Wisconsin has a Supreme Court election coming up in April. And although I think it's a loss for the DNC, but Ben Wickler is a gain because he's staying as the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, and he'll get out the vote. But those are important elections. And the special elections to replace the people from Congress that Donald Trump is tapping for his cabinet, those are important elections. They are opportunities.
Yep.
So please, everyone, stay informed, be involved, pick one issue you care about. You don't have to know about every 100 executive order that's horrible. Pick 1 or 2 and fight on that basis, whether it's fighting to keep Noah or fighting to keep who, whatever is your issue, fight for that and make sure that you vote to make sure that those things can return to our democracy.
Well, thank you, Jill, and I will definitely be seeing you soon.
Thanks. Bye, Michael.